What's up, bookworms? This is Megan coming at you with another Cantina conversation. Today's episode features a chat with Libby Cudmore. We're talking about her book, Negative Girl. That book is available now. Libby was such a gem to talk to. I really enjoyed hearing about her experiences and how she developed these characters and the hot messes that they can be, and just kind of developing an intense partnership with two very, troubled characters. Troubled but intelligent. And I actually got to meet up with Libby at the Midwest Mystery Conference that took place last month. So excited to get to know her and talk to her in person, have her send my book. It was really great experience. But without further ado, here is Libby.
So today we've got Libby Cudmore. We're talking about Negative Girl. That book is out now. Libby, thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed the suspense and you tugged us along. I liked getting to know Martin and Valerie. I really are hot messes that they are, that they can be, but they're so like intelligent. And I'm like, I love getting to know them. I love the opportunity and all the like the little twists that maybe people didn't see coming. So I appreciate. We're gonna dive a little bit deeper
Thank
today.
you so much for having me, and I'm glad you enjoyed the book. Thank you. That's very sweet of you to say. I appreciate you calling them hot messes because they really can
Yeah.
be.
A little bit. Yeah, like they're on top of their shit. They got their shit together, but they definitely got some inner
And there's
inner
there's
turmoil,
kind
energy.
of Jenga towers about halfway through the game, like one wrong move, and it's all tumbling
Yeah,
down.
yeah, that's a nice way to put it. I know, but I love it. I love that messy. I love the juicy stuff. I love the drama, and obviously with a thriller, crime fiction, murder mystery, what have you, it just adds to it,
Yeah.
right? Because these aren't like Boy Scouts or whatever, like stand up citizens necessarily, but I think that's also the interesting part of it. Like you gotta, people have to think outside of the box,
Mhm.
and people have to like know pick up on those cues when they're trying to like search for details and investigate and stuff like that. They got to be bold, and hot messes are bold. And so it's just, that boldness got them into certain places, and but then it also they're putting it to good putting it to good use.
Yeah,
So
they can use especially in mysteries with private eyes. They need
mm,
to be able to use underground contacts and different contacts and contacts that they might not be able to use if they were like law
yeah,
enforcement. Go a little bit underground, which is why I really like writing PIs because you have to when you're writing it, you have to think, okay, they don't have access to labs and blood spatter
yeah,
analysis. What are they going to use in their world?
yeah, 100%. And because they don't, and the upside of that is they're not holding to the bureaucracy. They don't have to go. They go by their own
Yeah.
book. They don't have to like.
Yeah.
They're not holding to certain rules. They're just like, okay, I shouldn't get dirty. Who cares? I'm gonna get
Yeah.
dirty because nobody's gonna get me in trouble unless you can like tiptoe that too. First of all, okay, we're gonna get into it. First of all, can you share a summary of the book so that people can follow along with the conversation if they haven't read it yet?
Sure. The book follows my private eye, Martin Wade, who used to be a sort of a Paul Westerberg punk type rock and roll hellion, but now is reformed, gotten sober, and works as a private eye in upstate New York. And he's joined by his assistant, Valerie Jacks, who's got her own sort of background drama. And Martin's bandmate's daughter shows up with a case and then turns up dead. And so it's a whodunit, what happened to this
Mhm.
girl, and all of their sort of mysterious pasts all kind of collide.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how you kind of like introduce that. I love that he was because it was like definitely a blast from his past.
Mhm.
And then he's just because he's wait a second. He's like, do I know this person? And then it turns out he does.
Mhm.
And then he's oh shit. And then he's has no choice but to reacquaint himself with the life that he had separated himself from.
Yes.
And yeah, that was just I was like, yeah, Libby, throw it at him, ruffle his feathers, do like make it messy. Yeah, it just makes it a little more juicy, and it's like there's more at stake
Mhm.
almost because then it's he's not completely impartial. It's not, and he's also worried like it's a conflict of interest. But then Val's no, there's something going on here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it. I love that we're an awesome
Thank
pair.
you.
Can you go into your background a little bit? This is not your debut, right? You've written like one or two other
There's
ones,
my
right?
first one came out in 2016. It was called The Big Rewind, and it was also a mystery.
Okay,
And
there you go.
Martin has appeared in a handful of stories that were in Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine, in Tough, in one of them won the Black Orchid from the Nero Wolfe Society and was in Alfred Hitchcock. And there's one in the anthology Lawyers, Guns, and Money, which won a Seamus Award.
Oh,
So,
so Martin is he just doesn't leave you alone.
yeah,
Like,
he's been around for a while as a solo act, and then Valerie joins. I think she showed up last year in the short
okay,
stories in a story called Wait for the Blackout. She makes her
okay,
debut. So they've been around for a bit before this
okay,
novel.
yeah, okay. So it's their first like long
Yeah.
form story. Oh, that's so interesting. I was like doing a little bit digging around just to get to know you, and I think when I first started reading it, and so yeah, I'll have to bookmark some of those short stories like to look out for them because I think that's so cool. They, like I said, they make an interesting pair. They make a fun pair, and it's so they're so supportive of each other, but also like real with each other,
Mhm.
and it's like a weird like closeness, like intimacy that they sometimes share, even though it's strictly like it's like
Yeah.
platonic, but it's like partners. It's not romantic. It's not like I want to explore that. Like, how did you navigate? I guess because it's hard because sometimes people like, oh, will they, won't they, or is there something there? But you made it very clear, and then plus Val is same sex or
She's
bi,
bisexual, yes.
and yeah, and I guess that's an easy way to make it clear. But like, it was just yeah. Like, how did you navigate that relationship, that partnership, like the ups and downs of it, and all
I've
that?
always been fascinated with those sort of non-romantic intimacies in relationships, and I have so many close male friends that
Hmm.
I haven't been and won't be intimate with, but I love them to
Yeah,
death and would do anything for them, and so I wanted to explore that, uh, and really celebrate it in a way because I think
yeah.
it's really beautiful, and I want to see more of it, and I wanna see them have lives outside of each other. They're the most important thing
Oh
in
yeah,
each other's lives, but they've got relationships and lives outside of each other as well. So I think that just
yeah.
it also works in a sort of world building where you see the relationships they have and that expands Perrine, where the story takes place, it expands their world and their history and their own backstories rather than just that
Yeah.
black box, one room. It's only the 2 of them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because I guess like when he hired her on as an assistant, and they're handling serious situations, so they have to not only be on the same page, but also handle it with the same
Mhm.
outlook, be on the same level, and just not shy away from the gritty or from the uncomfortable
Yeah.
situations. And so, yeah, no, I love that. I love that outlook on celebrating platonic, even if it was a same sex, opposite sex
Mhm.
platonic relationships, because that's okay. Obviously, if Valerie, she's same sex, but then she was partnered with another woman, it could, you could still look at it that way, like it's platonic, it's a
Yeah.
partnership, it's a business, a professional
Yeah.
relationship. But with that, it's I really liked how they not pushed the boundaries but stepped over and being like more
Mhm.
close, like more intimate. Like she saw him at his worst, and she's like keeping secrets too, but he's still like respecting that.
Mhm.
And yeah, I appreciate that because obviously it's they exist, right? Like I have male friends that I would never. I'm pretty sure I would rather shoot myself in the foot than explore anything. Like I'm married and all that,
Yeah.
and but there was just I don't know, at least before I met my husband, like in college, two of my best friends were men, and it was just never. It's funny, like talking about romantic conquest. So in college, it's that happens a lot where like people are hooking up and stuff, but it was never. It just was. We never saw each other that way,
Yeah.
but it was like still they're like my best friends. I wouldn't trade them for the world. They've seen me at my worst, and they've been there for me. And so yeah, I totally appreciate because it's so true. I think a lot of yeah, like just exploring that relationship in this type of it fit
Thank
really
you.
well because they have like little crushes or little like romantic back and forths on by them in
Mhm.
their own lives separately. She's being friendly with someone that she meets during her investigation, and then the waitress has been laid it on thick. I know. She was like, "I was wondering when you were gonna I was like, "Yes, girl, make it," like, it was just so cute, and I love that how they were both like, "Well, what's going on there? What's going on there?" Like, I like, again, it's adding to the ruffling of the feathers. I like
Yeah, I've had a lot of people who've read the book say that Joan is their favorite character, the waitress. Like she's one of those characters that is a sort of a fan favorite. And it's funny because in my last book, in the Big Rewind, there was a side character named Philip, and he was a fan favorite. He was the main character Jet's boss. And people really liked him, and the original plan for a Big Rewind sequel had Philip and his 2 friends, his friend Martin and Martin's daughter Valerie, and that's where they originally started as this father-daughter team.
Okay.
And then when that book didn't get picked up, I reworked them as a detective pairing, and so
Okay.
there was always this sense that he was older, maybe not a little wiser, but there was more of a non-romantic intimacy there that was always built in. There was never a thought like, "Oh, she has a crush on him." Although it's
Or
funny because I probably do, because I went back through some very early drafts, and I had written a paragraph of her describing him, and specifically his suits, and it's almost erotic just in the way, like, she's describing the fabric and the way he dresses, and I was just like,
the
"My."
way they fit on
Yeah, I was
him,
just like,
yeah.
"My god, what
Yeah.
was I?" I mean, I know what I was like, but just, like, all these very intimate fabric and tailoring details.
How did that go? Was that like part of your research? Because that's one of the questions I was going to ask is, how did your research go? Did you have to search for things to get clarification and authenticity? I imagine maybe that your Google search history is a little questionable. Was there anything fascinating that or surprising that you learned? Stuff like that?
I don't wanna say because it'll give away part of the story,
Okay,
but I
sure.
definitely
Yeah.
learned certain drug combinations, like
Okay. Okay.
how to put together some sort of poisons, if you will. I had to look up, like, how one different ways of ingesting heroin, because Martin is a recovering heroin addict. Yeah, just little stuff like that, and then would go down weird wormholes of music, which was always
Okay.
really fun, because I love music. Music has always been a big part of the books. Obviously, it's a big part of this book, and so a lot of listening to different bands and trying to figure out, okay, what would Martin's old band, the French Letters, sound
Yeah.
like? So that part was fun, less questionable, but then I'd lose myself reading Trouble Boys by Bob Muir, which was one of the really big kind of foundational texts for this story.
What is that about? Do you want to
Oh,
share? We
that's
can move on if you
no,
don't
that's
want
fine.
to talk about it.
It's about the Replacements.
Okay.
So, they were a big influence on the French Letters and what they might sound like.
Okay. Oh,
But
that's
it's
really
a really
cool. Yeah.
heavy, big, thick book, and I'd start trying to look one thing up and
Oh yeah, you gotta before it's 5 hours
yep.
later for one thing. It reminds me of, an interview I did with another author where she was, like, doing it was a historical fiction, like, kinda time travel, though, and so she was like, "Girl, I got sucked into a hole researching, like, 1900s makeup,"
Oh,
and
cool.
it only turned out to 2 lines of her her
Yeah.
book.
It's vibes-based research,
Yeah.
so it's not gonna end up in, but you need to have that background, and so
It
mine was
yeah, it's like the iceberg
yeah.
thing. Like the tip is what this is what you but underneath it's that's what people say, oh, with the book versus a movie, it's that you see the movie as a tip and then the book is like underneath the
Mhm.
water. But I think so that gets so much meta, more meta, deeper, where when authors are researching for their stories, like only so much of it, or even with the character
Mhm.
development, maybe they have to like have I don't know however many words or pages just describing this character and their background and what motivates them and all that shit. But only portions of that will make it out into the story. But you still got to flesh it out. You
Yeah.
still got to get to know it. You still got to learn it. You still got to read it. You still need that information. It just unfortunately like takes the time that it takes. And then you're like, oh God, this only was like 4 sentences.
Yeah, no, I definitely probably the biggest thing was researching nightlife in LA in the '90s, so making sure I had the clubs right, making
Mm,
sure I had
mm.
locations right as he refers back to when he lived there. And the story Charlie's Medicine, which is in the Lawyers, Guns, and Money anthology, that is his origin story and it takes place in the '90s. So that's where a lot of that
Okay.
research ended up going. What nightclubs would he be going into or not going into? Like, where is he in this moment geographically?
Yeah.
So that ended up being a big part of it.
That's
Yeah.
good that you were able to use it, like,
Mhm.
elsewhere. That's what I was telling that author, I was like, "Who knows? You write something you just have to base a book, your next book off of where you could use more of that makeup
Yeah,
information."
exactly.
No, it was really funny, but it's so true. It's you're not alone. It's like it's almost I feel like certain things are like almost a rite of passage for authors because speak to so many of you guys, and that's one of I ask a lot of the same questions just because I like hearing the answers
Mhm.
and 'cause it's so fun. It's like a consistent question to ask to get a baseline of understanding. And yeah, that's one of the ones, especially for a suspense thriller, is, oh, do you search in incognito mode? Do you
Yeah,
like
no, and it always makes you really fun at parties, and I was a journalist for 11 years, so
Okay,
I
okay.
in a small town in upstate New York, and, like, on the front lines of the opioid epidemic. So there was also a
Oh,
lot of
okay.
just from interviewing people about it, being able to understand and witness, firsthand what that did to a
Yeah.
town, what that does to families, what that does to people.
Yeah.
So a lot of my research wasn't necessarily, today I'm going to research blank. It was, I just covered this for a newspaper. And that's not just bad stuff. Sometimes that's like good stuff. So I end up having all of these weird like factoids. Did you know that
Yeah.
they still make wax cylinders? Wax cylinder. There's a place near me that will repair old Victrolas and make wax cylinders. Just
Yeah.
again, dumbest, weirdest. But
Random trivia,
here's how
like
you make candy canes.
yeah. I love that. I love that. So, oh man. So, were there any skills like in your professional job that kind of transferred over to you writing, like creative writing and writing for like a different method of writing, different audiences, stuff like that? Did you like any skills that transferred from professional to this project or other projects that you've done?
Handing in clean copy, not being super precious about my work, understanding that it's gonna get edited and being active in the editorial process and not,
Oh, that's so
yeah,
healthy.
not resisting it, and also knowing, like, at some point you have to let it go, and I always go back to Tina Fey's Bossy Pants. She talked
Oh,
about
yeah.
how Lorne Michael would say, "The show doesn't go on because it's ready, the show goes on because it's 11:30," and that, like,
Yeah.
sometimes you just have to put your book out in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, yeah, that's so true. That resonates with anybody creating
Yeah.
anything. It doesn't matter if like it's a book or it could be like a painting or something for the professional job where it's just, you have a deadline. And if you had the option, you would still be tweaking it if you really cared about it, if it was a big deal. So I totally think that sentiment resonates with so many things, so many industries, so many
Yeah.
people where it's just, no, you gotta, a deadline's here, you gotta turn it
It's
in,
time.
whether or not like it's, yeah, yeah, it's this is what you got. Okay, just pray. But no, it's so true because it's, don't let perfectionism get in the way of still turning in something really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Or even if you got like little tweaks in there, because I'm like, oh, that's another thing where like I follow authors on Instagram, and it's they sometimes indie authors usually have a little more leeway, but they will push back the release date because they're like, I'm sorry to do this, but I need
Mhm.
to make sure that it's
Yeah.
ready. And I'm like, and then usually the readers are super positive, like super supportive about that. They're like, no, I want to read something that like you're ready to put out.
Mhm.
But I can understand with traditional publishing, you're like, oh
Yeah, this
shit,
is the date
like,
it has to go to the printer, and
yeah,
this really was, this story is so precious to me, and they all are, but this one especially because it's been so long in the build, and we had an audiobook, and we got Jay Carnes, who was on The Shield and Sons of Anarchy and Burn Notice, to read for Martin, and he was always who I pictured as Martin anyway. Um,
that's
yeah, no,
awesome.
it was great, he was great, but as I'm listening to it, I'm like, "Oh, I wish I had picked like a different word, it would have sounded better in his voice." And then it's, "No, you
Yeah.
just have to let this go, Dom. Like, you really let it go. Let it go."
Yeah. Yeah, look, really try to, yeah, do your best to just appreciate the big picture of
Exactly.
it and appreciate like what you put out because it's a
And
lot. It's a
and
lot.
only I know, "Oh, I should have not,"
Oh
yeah,
no, yeah.
not used
If
that
you
word.
ask any of your readers, they're not gonna say, "Oh, she could have used a better
Yeah,
word for."
exactly. So you really do have to let go.
Yeah, and it's, yeah, exactly. You're the only one who's gonna be your own worst critic. You're the only one who's gonna be like, "Oh gosh, that was not, that was not 11 out of 10, Libby. That was 10 out of 10, Libby." Like
It's
what?
funny, I'm either, like, my own worst critic or my own biggest champion. I never do the humble thing. I'm like Bart Simpson marching around, "I am so great. I am so great."
Hey, more power to you. I think more people in general, especially women, should be doing that. Not like we're expected to be humble, but it's no, I'm a boss ass bitch. Like what, like, yeah, Libby, you put out a book and you wrote a book and you made like some kick ass characters and you plotted some really smart and sophisticated like
Thank you. I
storylines,
am
and
actually, like,
you
humbled
go
when people say that. I'm just like, "Oh, thank you." But,
oh,
like,
okay. Like you shy away, but then when you're talking about yourself, you're like, no, I'm fucking
yeah,
awesome.
like,
Like,
in my own, like, every day, I'm like, "Yeah, I'm basically the best author that's ever lived."
yeah. As you should. No, that's perfect. You got it. You got it. You got the formula down. You're good. You're good. So you tend to like typically go for murder mystery, suspense thriller. What kind of draws you to the genre? Like what I'm a sucker for
Mhm.
suspense. And so I like to talk to authors about like I don't know, if it's done really well, it keeps you going. Like you're flipping the page and you're like, oh shit, like you're invested. So I explore like what draws you to that and whatever.
I think, I had always it started out with a sort of childish love of fantasy. I'm not great at writing fantasy. It's too broad, it's too big, and it's just not something I love the trappings of it, but I don't love the sort of piece by piece. But I did always like the idea of a quest narrative. And then when I was in college, I took a class with Professor Michael Sharp on Arthurian literature. And I don't remember what put me in that class. I do know that my friend Jason, I didn't know him then, was in it and he was really good looking. So if I know my college self, that might have had something to do with it. I don't
Yeah,
know.
probably.
But I was in this class and we read The Long Goodbye at the end of it. And I was so enchanted when I read the first couple chapters that I read the entire thing in one night. And I realized this is what I want to do. I want to write detective fiction specifically because I love the quest narrative of it. The idea of restoring justice,
Mm,
of doing what you can for someone who doesn't have any other options. And I always tell when I teach detective fiction, I always tell my students, for the most part, if something happens, the cops get involved.
mhm.
And if you and I came across a dead body, we would call the cops. We wouldn't be like, I guess it's up to us to solve this murder.
Yeah.
And but the in fiction and too often in real life, the cops don't do anything about it. They don't have all the facts. They don't bother necessarily.
They have a little bias,
Yeah,
yeah.
there's so many things. And that's where either the amateur sleuth or the private eye comes in because they are there to restore justice. A
Yeah.
cop character has to solve it. That's their job. But an amateur sleuth can just walk away. They're just a neighbor or a hairdresser or a flower shop owner or whatever. What business did they have solving mysteries? But they are drawn to solving it because they know no one else will. And the private
Yeah.
eye, there's a great tradition in private eyes that I like to think that I keep up is that the private eye almost never wants to take the case. Or they take what they think is gonna be like a simple tail job, and then their partner gets shot, and then they gotta find out who killed Miles Archer, where the Maltese Falcon is, and I like that part of it. I like the quest. The sense of
I love that term, the quest narrative. I guess I never looked at murder mysteries or suspense or crime fiction that way, but that's exactly what it
yeah,
is.
and it's right
Like,
and
it's a
wrong,
quest.
and I
Yeah.
like
Yeah. That's so powerful. Yeah, and I guess there's obviously a formula to follow, but I feel like there's still so much you could do with
yeah,
it.
really the only
And
formula is that they have to
yeah.
solve it in the end. Everything else, that's it.
You can do whatever, like how you did with your characters, how it was like you wanted to lead on your readers, but you still wanted to you want to respect that line where you're like, you don't want to spell it out. You want to have still that mystery where they're still guessing.
Mhm.
And then once it does happen, once you do figure it out, or once they figure it out, like I feel like, so I always say this, I think I'm the kind of consumer of entertainment. I feel like I'm the kind of person who doesn't always catch things right away. And I'm not always clued in or whatever you want to call it. I don't want to say it goes over my head. I'm like paying attention, but I'm not like predicting.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh no, it's this person, it's the sister. I'm like, oh, and so but I appreciate, because it's like, it's my experience. I'm like, I'm enjoying my experience of being surprised, being like pulled in different directions. I appreciate that. But my husband, on the other hand, because we watch our shows, he's not much of a reader, but we watch our
Yeah.
shows. And like whenever we have our little ritual where we like, okay, the kids are in bed, we sit down, we get set up. And then we got, okay, it's Wednesday or Thursday night. Like, and but he is always, he catches on so easily where he'll be like, oh, I bet it's this. And then sure enough, like mid episode, he's proven. And I'm like, why don't you just go in a focus group or something
Mhm.
and go into a writer's room and be like, no, I see that coming. Because I'm like, okay, am I a unique experience or is he a unique
My
experience?
husband always asks, "So who do you think did it?" And I'm like, "Just let me watch it." I'm not that great at guessing, and I think because I think part of it is because my mysteries are so character driven that the
Yeah, yeah.
mystery is always secondary to me.
You're like, oh, I think I need a plot in
Yeah,
there. Like,
I
yeah.
changed the killer in this one like 3 times. In The Big Rewind, I've told this story, but I love telling it. I didn't know who the killer was until 3/4 of the way through the book. And then I had to go back and seed it in, but I was like, "Oh, I guess I should figure out
Yeah.
who the killer is." I got so wrapped up in the characters and that story that I again pulled a Raymond Chandler, like, I forgot to figure out who killed the chauffeur. Um,
Oh, that's so fun. That's so funny because that's so unique. Because it's, yeah, because you're like so focused on the characters and the
and I
path.
like to solve the mystery along with them. I like to figure out what the clues would be and what they lead to. I know
That's just showcasing your love for the genre because you like want to make the experience enjoyable for the
yeah,
reader. You're like, what do I like? This is how I'm going to feed that to the
and
reader. Yeah.
also just with the information, because I know what the information that these characters have, and so what
Mm,
choices
mm,
would they make? What would they recognize as a clue versus what I'm gonna seed in as a clue? So it's
yeah.
okay, this might look like something the cops might overlook or the reader might overlook, but because we've established that Valerie knows this and this, she's gonna recognize it as a clue where Martin might because he doesn't have the information Valerie does and vice
Yeah.
versa. I like solving it alongside them.
Yeah, no, that is super fun because it makes it fun for you, and it makes it fun to write, so it makes it fun to read.
Mhm.
That's because I feel like if the author's not having fun, like, that shows
Yeah.
up, and that's, like, that's another common thing that I find with authors that I talk to. It's because that's why I like to ask, like, what draws you the genre that you stick with? And a lot of them are like, "Oh, I grew up reading Agatha Christie," and,
Yeah.
and that's just what hooks them, and even, like, with the romance, it's like people will ask the authors, like, "Why do you include those spicy scenes in?" And I like to read those, so I'm gonna include
Mhm.
those. And it's just, you're not alone, girl. There's certain things that just sell. There are certain things that just get you going, and if that gets you going as a writer, it's going to show on the
Yeah.
page. And so that's, yeah, absolutely 100%. It makes total sense. I love it. I love it. I want you to like ruffle those feathers and throw them into things and figure out, okay, who's the perpetrator here. I'm going to develop these characters and make them messy, but then they still got like a huge deal to
Mhm.
solve. Like, it's like there's a murder here and it's a woman, and it's like there's history there, there's background there. And then Valerie, she's like, obviously Martin like cares. He cares, but it's so complicated for
Yeah.
him. But then Valerie's something doesn't make sense. And then but then Valerie's friends and stuff open more, they feel more free to open up to
Mhm.
her about, hey, there's been something fishy going on. I don't think that this was a suicide. There's something here. And yeah, that just makes it like where the readers, oh shit, like what,
Yeah.
no, yeah, yeah, absolutely. I love it. I love
Thank
all of
you.
that. Yeah. So we're good. Yeah. Speaking of, we're gonna get into the harder parts. I want to explore how you navigated like the darker themes, like I said, murder, violence, drug or substance abuse, alcoholism, their backgrounds, and talk of suicide, stuff like that. Like, how did you navigate the more serious issues with being respectful and authentic? And because I imagine, I ask authors this and I'm like, I imagine, what did you have to walk away, get in the zone, get out of the zone? Like, I want to explore how you navigated that and integrated that into your story.
I think being respectful of it and making it very human and not making it graphic and shocking, I think was the most important part. It did get dark at times, like, in the writing of it, but I think because these characters, like, had so much heart, I was able to write for them because I guess, like, how do I wanna say that? Just because I could feel what they were feeling, it didn't feel like I was exploiting them, and so it was hard, but I had them with me, if that makes sense.
Yeah. You were, yeah, like you were protecting them, you were protecting the situation while you were
And protecting
writing,
the
like,
reader
to
in
yeah.
some ways. I
Yeah.
don't wanna ever make my I wanna make them uncomfortable in the sense that you signed up for this. It's not a cozy, it's a thriller, and it's
Mm-mm.
not
Yeah.
polite, but I don't ever wanna be gratuitous.
Yeah. Not like gasping for gasping's
Yeah.
sake, not, "Oh, I'm gonna do everything I can to make them clutch their
Yeah.
pearls." You don't Yeah, you
Yeah,
wanted
not a
because it's the gritty part, it's real, and it's yeah, exactly. You're investigating a murder. This woman, this might be an approaching spoiler territory, but it's she lived a double life,
Mhm.
and so it's like when you're approaching that, when you're talking about that, when you're including that as a storyline, it's yeah, you got to get a little dark, you
Yeah.
got to get a little serious, and but you also want yeah, you don't want it to distract from like you want it to complement it, you want it to
Yeah.
provide important
And
detail.
having it be more character focused, I think, keeps keeps me from writing, like, too much graphic description because it's like Valerie wouldn't be thinking that way, Martin wouldn't be thinking that way, so I'm in their heads, and how would they translate this?
Oh, that's such a good point. That's such a good point. Wait, and they're like trying to really get in their character mindset. Like, would they really pay attention to vomit or the blood on the wall, or would they, they probably notice it obviously, but they would like maybe move past it because maybe they're used to
Or
it,
they would
or maybe they're
see
like,
the victim.
what advice do you have for Martin? What advice do you have for Valerie?
Um, for Valerie, I think it'd be like, slow down a little bit and think, because she's much more impulsive. She's the brawn of the operation. He's definitely the brains. He's very thoughtful. He's very methodical. He's a little bit more by the rules.
Yeah.
And I think,
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe don't be so reluctant to take a case. Like, just take a case once in a while. I don't know. And that's again, that's a tradition. They never get paid. The detective never gets paid. I think there's a scene in one story, the second Martin Wade short story, A Brief History of Local Warfare, where he talks about sending an invoice that he knows just isn't gonna get paid. I don't know, maybe get a collections agency on the line?
Or it's on the record, the paperwork's there,
Yeah.
at least you have it. Yeah, that's so funny. I know, that's so funny because that's so Martin,
Yeah.
right? It's he doesn't like, he's one to be, like, by the book, even though he doesn't have to be by the book, and Valerie's just fuck it, like, she's a wild
Yeah.
card, and she's whatever, I'm not she'll go dumpster diving, she'll go
Yeah. She's a little hipster like that,
Yeah.
so
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I think I just appreciate that about her character. It's no, you go girl, you go
I love
girl.
her.
So, Libby Cudmore, what are you working on? Are you working on anything that you could talk about?
I don't like to, so I will say I'm working on a
Okay,
couple
no.
more Martin and Valerie short stories. There are 2 more
Yay!
slated. There's one called Enjoy the Silence, which is coming out in the December-January issue of Alfred Hitchcock Mystery Magazine, and there's another one called Doctor Bones, which is, slated for another or sorry, let me take that back. Let me take that again. So I've got a story called Enjoy the Silence, which is another Martin and Valerie story coming out in Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine
Perfect.
in December. And then I've got another one also in Ellery Queen called Doctor Bones that's coming out sometime next year. So really just writing more
Yay.
stories for them.
You should also write more novels about them. I think there's so much you could build upon, and I love the
I
characters. I love Val, and I love Martin. Like,
I
dude,
always say, if you wanna see more Martin and Valerie stories, go out and pick up a copy of Negative Girl, listen to the audiobook. It's on Audible, it's on Spotify. That's the best way to get a second book is to make sure the first one as well.
yeah,
I know that sounds really,
yeah.
like, crude, but that's the honest truth of it.
No, it's so real. It's pre-orders obviously help, but it's if you want you're like an author that you like, if you want them to keep making content, keep making books and keep creating stories, you have to still show support for them, even if it's after the book is released. Like even after that, it's like there are authors that I've gotten their free copies, the arcs, because I review them, but then I'm like, I'll go ahead and order the paperback because I like want the trophy on my
Mhm.
shelf and I really like the story. And
Yeah.
it's so important. I think like definitely that pre-orders help, reviews help, ratings help,
Yeah.
all of that good
And I
yeah.
really obviously the paperback's great, but I really love the audiobook. It's really
Yeah?
Jay is wonderful. I read for Valerie, so it's really fun if you like.
Oh, you
Yes,
do? So you're doing
yes, if
Valerie?
you're
Oh
listening to
my
me ramble,
god.
you can listen to me read.
Oh my god, no, I would like, if we had more time, I would totally dive into that, but because that's so cool,
It was
that's so
really
cool.
fun.
Because that's like a whole 'nother thing. You're
Yeah,
acting, and you gotta do the pauses and do the emphasize the things that you pictured in your head, and I don't know how voice actors
I
do it
know.
because some of them, like yeah, some of them, like, even though they're not trying to sound sexy, they sound so sexy, and I'm like, "Oh, okay." Whenever he speaks, I'm like
You should maybe give the audiobook a listen, is all I'm saying. I
Yeah,
think you'll
oh.
enjoy it.
So Libby Cudmore, Negative Girl, that book is available now. Thank you
Oh,
so
thank
much for your
you.
time and for your authentic answers and for everything. And
Thank
I would
you.
yeah, recommend this book to anybody who likes suspense, mystery, murder, and hot, messy characters. Yeah, and then I'll keep a lookout for your short stories. And then yeah, if you ever are doing another long form novel, let me know. I'd love to talk to you
Oh, I
again.
would love that.
And there you go. That was Libby Cudmore talking about her book, Negative Girl. That book is available now. Check out the show notes where you can find links to purchase the book and find Libby on social media and her website. While you're online searching on those social media sites, searching for book recommendations, do find Cantina Book Club and check out cantinabookclub.com for book reviews and author interviews. And just to keep up with everything that I've got going on here. If you do like a book, it's so important and so helpful to the authors to go on Amazon and Goodreads if you can and give it a rating and a review. It actually does help them out more than you realize. But either way, as always, thank you guys so much for listening.